Hi there, welcome to MacroMentors podcast. We're here with another one of our mentors called Laura. We were just chatting off camera about the physical kind of ETF conference industry seems to be coming back in Asia. Laura, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit and we can roll from there?
Sure. Hello, everyone, and thanks to Armin and George's invitation. I'm very happy today to be here to share with you more about myself. So I'm Laura Louis, the co-CIO and partner at Premia Partners Company Limited. So like George mentioned, we're based out of Hong Kong. We are a homegrown ETF manager that I started back in 2016 with my two other partners. One of the reasons is because we are very passionate about ETF, and we thought we have seen a lot of product gaps for clients in Asia. So we want to build something in Asia for Asia. So that's a bit of my current background right now. So I've always been in the finance industry with the sell side and then switching over to buy side for the past 20 years.
And how built out is the kind of Asian ETF industry? Like obviously, I think a lot of us are quite familiar with the American one where we have like very specific sectors. We have inverse ETFs. We have all sorts of things. And they're like very, very liquid. Is it the same or it's sort of getting there?
I think we're still slightly behind the curve, even behind Europe for the time being. But I think we're slowly building out. Like you said, I think the first ETF came out in the North America a lot earlier than the first one in Asia. And the first one that we have seen in Hong Kong was in 2000 when the tracker fund came out because of the government support. So I think since then, a lot of the products in this region are quite skewed to home buyers. For example, in Hong Kong, the most popular top 5 ETFs are always concentrated with Hong Kong and China. So unlike in the US, if you want to take a view for your own like retirement fund or want to skew to sectors, skew to regions, we have rather limited choices, and the turnover or the volume that we see in the market was not as active. But I think the past 5 or 6 years, you have seen a lot of implementations or regulation changes, or the exchange here is trying to do a lot more, not only in Hong Kong, but like I've worked in regional ETF managers before, like in Taiwan, Korea, Japan, Singapore. We're all trying very hard to build the ecosystem here. So we have seen a lot of improvements since then. We have the ETF Connect that just rolled out this year in July. We have seen this first smart beta ETF that we launched back in 2017. Right. Yeah, sorry to insert like a little advertisement, but we try to do something different. So a lot of thematic base, I think not only us, but you have seen a lot of peers, incumbents in the market launching like EV focus, ESG theme, or even inverse leverage that was launched 3 years ago in Hong Kong. So we are seeing a lot of new products ideas, more innovative ideas coming out. But like you said, in terms of the product variation, number of products, or the whole infrastructure, I think we still have some catch up to do here. So there are a lot of opportunities for not only the people in this industry, but people trying to get in as well.
Where do you see the opportunities?
Because I'm talking to quite a lot of the financial institutions in the region. I think people are getting more and more cautious about like the cost that you pay for the core portfolio, or the transparency, or the possibility of automation, or maybe the team structure nowadays would be more skilled in the region from what I have seen. And I have spoken to a lot of clients. They were trying to shift some of the more sophisticated exposures, or if they have a very small team structures, to maybe allocate more of their portfolios to passive strategies, so they can have their team to focus more on finding the alpha, like using more like a barbell strategy. So I think they have this internal like a mandate that they have to fulfill, like year by year. You will have around 5% of your portfolio converted to passive investments while you generate more alpha from the other side. That kind of conversations. That was why we, and also some of our incumbents in the industry, were very keen to launch these exposures to fill the gap.
And are there like particular sovereigns or that people are interested in? Is it mainly kind of in Hong Kong and China, or you do like Vietnam and other parts of Southeast Asia?
You'll be quite surprised about like how wide the coverages would be. Like you said, of course, like a Hong Kong financial institutions as owners, you have seen from the inflows in the region, for example, the China government bonds, they used to go direct, but now they are using more ETF, and it's being converted into the flows in the region. And even like Japan, they also use ETFs. Our national team from China also use ETF. And I think the audience is getting a lot more different nowadays as well. We are seeing more high net worths, more the family offices, because they have a rather simple due diligence procedure. They don't need to go through like doing DDs on the manager. They can just choose the strategy they like, and if the whole structure makes sense to them, they can make the decision very quickly. And also in terms of the investors, we have seen people from Thailand, Brunei, everywhere you can think of, like Israel, or even from Europe as well, like Northern Europe. I thought they would be quite focused on using ETF in the past because of regulation requirement. But then for some of the portfolios, they have also been using global ETFs to build the portfolio exposure.
And you were saying just before we had a chat that like you feel like we're at this kind of apex moment in Asia where if the lockdowns get kind of reduced, everyone is going to start traveling. How close do you think we are? Think it's going to happen? Or
I think for the region, it's already kind of happening. I was just in Singapore in June. I felt freedom again when I started traveling again after 2 to 3 years. So like in Singapore or in Korea, they have already lifted a lot of the requirements for tourists to go in. I think from where I'm based in right now for Hong Kong, you might have seen from the news. I don't know when this will be showing on live, but then we are talking about very soon we will see the 0+7 type of arrangements, which means that there's no hotel quarantine anymore. I think you might have heard about the big conference that Hong Kong MA, the Monetary Authority, is going to host in November. Mm-hmm. So we are all having our focus on that, preparing for the opening up again. But in terms of daily lives, I think we are pretty much back to normal. Like not like before, we have the lockdown, we have to go home before a certain time. And in terms of gatherings, you can still gather if we all did the RAT. So I think it's a big improvement already, but of course, compared to the rest of the world, a lot of people think we are still slightly behind, but we are slowly moving there.
One of our other mentors, he used to be a hedge fund manager. It's like Russell Clark, and Russell now runs like a Substack that people can subscribe to, and he has been putting out some of the data of obviously like Japan's been having this like kind of massive currency depreciation, and one of the amazing figures is obviously the bulk of Japanese tourism is now coming from China. And as the Chinese it's been trickier for them to get to Japan, this like loss of revenue, it's like a full cliff chart. And it's amazing, like the sheer size of that as a capital flow and how important that had become a little bit of like a counterbalance of their economy. And now it's kind of like suddenly gone. I guess the thing to watch now is it for to go the other way, right? Which is like suddenly the flow comes back and everyone's looking in one direction.
Yeah.
You see this across Asia, by the way. I think very similar patterns.
I think very similar. Maybe Hong Kong is a little bit more lucky because we're pegged to US dollars. But I think a lot of my friends in the region are seeing this quite obvious inflation hit in terms of the daily lives. And like you said, because of the lack of tourists, I think we're still trying to play smart and arbitrage online because regionally we can buy a lot of things from like the Rakuten or Amazon Japan or even like Thailand, where we have seen the record new lows, and Korea. So we are still trying to get take advantages of these opportunities and do it for the personal side. So it's quite obvious trend actually for us in Asia.
Yes, you're the super privileged one in Hong Kong, and now your flat is just full of all the stuff you need for the next 5 years.
Indeed.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about kind of how you got to where you are now. If I'm right, you started in kind of equity derivatives and you've kind of worked your way into the ETF world. Is that fair?
Sure.
Where did it all begin?
Yeah, it's a long story, but I'll make it short. I'll cut to the point. Actually, at the beginning, I wasn't expecting myself to get into the finance industry, although it's one of the most crowded industry for Hong Kong. It's quite concentrated. I studied actuarial science at the University of Toronto, so I always thought I would ended up being in a consulting firm or an insurance company. So that was my very quick first job, a first taste of actuarial type of task that I had. But then I found out it wasn't really what I wanted to do all the calculations every day. And then, like you can imagine, there are a lot of opportunities in the banking industry in Hong Kong. So I think within the first 2 months, I realized if it's something not for me, I switched over very quickly to JP Morgan, which started my banking career. So I started off as a marketing person, but maybe you can't really tell from a video now, but I was a very shy person because I studied mathematics, usually the more nerdy group in the school. So we're not good at talking to people, or communication is not our strength. So I feel a lot more comfortable when I work with numbers, being more the quantitative side of things. So when I realized where my strengths and weaknesses are, and then some people were looking for the junior traders for the trading desk because they want more diversity and diversify out from only people coming from finance background or degree from maybe Bachelor of Commerce would get into this field. They want someone from engineering or statistics or actuarial science, something different. So I was very lucky to have a chance to get into the trading world, like you said, trading equity derivatives, which of course I was very confused at the beginning. I don't even know how to price the options correctly at that time, but that's how I started and ended up being a trader for more than 8 years. I was very lucky to have a lot of very good mentors, a very good manager at that time. They are all very smart people, graduated from MIT at the age of 19, that kind of profile,
wow.
the Ivy Leagues. But but for me, I'm not the brainer type, but then they taught me a lot of things, not only on the technical side, but beyond that, like how to build a market sense, how to take views, and how to manage the risk, which it's very useful for me for the rest of my career. And then, like I mentioned, we had the first ETF listed in Hong Kong. So I was being the market maker, the PD, or what you call AP in the US, which is a very narrow or niche job. I would say not a lot of people would be familiar with that ecosystem because it's a very small chunk, not a big P&L contributor of the bank. But I was trading Delta One. It was part of my mandate. So I spent some time on that, and I found out that this is a very good tool to utilize, not only for the FIs, but even for PA. I was very interested to hold some for myself because of the cost and transparency. And I was thinking why this kind of good products would be so limited. So I spent a lot of time talking to people, meeting people from this industry. And that was how I met the global head of ETF at Mirai Asset back then. So we were doing a lot of structured products for our partners, and he was very interested to find out more. And then I think, if you remember, I was at RBS, and there was this merger that happened after the GFC. That was the time we need to make the decision if we want to carry on in the trading side, which is a lot more competitive because of the integrations, if we want to just go and do something else. So that was the time when I spoke to this the asset manager, the ETF house. And they were very keen to build something outside of the headquarters because traditionally it was quite top-down driven, be it Korean ETF manager, Chinese ETF manager, or even the US. Hong Kong is more like a sales or the satellite office for them to distribute what the headquarters wanted to do. So he wanted to build something different. So he asked if I want to take the challenge because I never had the AM experience. I was never with buy side before. I never really led a team in the past when I was trading. But I took on that challenge, and then that's how it all began. And I have more passion about this product. And so in 2016, close to that, I was talking to the partners that started the firm with me right now and said, do you want to do something more different? Because for now, we are more like listening to instructions. If we have a chance to really build our own strategies, I think there are a lot of different products we can do, or we can be more innovative. And then we try to talk to some funders or family offices about the thoughts. And we were just kind of testing the water and sharing our feelings. But we were very lucky that one of the very famous senior person from Hong Kong, he also wanted to buy an ETF manager at that time. So we thought, maybe we can work something out together. And that's how we started Premia Partner.
It's quite interesting. It was off camera. We didn't get it recorded, but with one of our other mentors. No, not this. In a previous discussion, we were chatting to a guy called Charles, and Charles had also kind of ended up in Asia. And one of the strengths that I see that you have and they have is he went into the business and he spent a year trying to work out which was the right job for him. So rather than just arriving day one and I don't know, you're an analyst and just sticking with an analyst, he actually took the decision to kind of step back and work out what he's good and bad at, which is kind of very similar to what you've done with your marketing thing, right? You've gone and you've seen actually this probably isn't the right job for me. I actually need to like step out and find something else. I find that you meet quite a few people who will just be like, oh, well, that's what it is. And they'll get themselves in this cycle of just like, okay, I'm the senior marketing person thing, and they don't really enjoy it. And they haven't taken the decision kind of early enough in their career to go, actually, like, I should go and do something else. I need to find something that like suits me as a person.
Yeah, I think, like you said, I'm one of like the more lucky ones because I think you can imagine the traditional Chinese culture. Maybe you will have more not, I can't say burden, but some hopes from your families that if you have a stable job right now, you should stay on with it and just keep doing it, then you'll get rewarded. But then I think at that time, my parents were quite supportive that if I want to make changes, I better make it before 30 years old. Because if after I become like after 30, if I want to start from scratch again and be a new learner again, people might not be giving me as much opportunities. So I think that was why I wanted to take that step at that time.
And you chose the right wave, right? I mean, the ETF industry has developed in a way that I think, like, many people did not expect over the last, especially after the GFC, I would say, right? I mean, was that like, is this a similar timeline probably in Asia as well?
Yeah, quite similar. Maybe we are like 2 or 3 years behind, but still following the same type of movement. I think, like you said, a lot of people would question our decision about like switching over to ETFs because, as you can imagine, trading options, you have a lot of ways to make P&L or generate performance. Right. But ETF is so transparent and it's all based on the management fee after all the costs. So you can kind of work out a formula about how much you would make, how profitable if you start a company it would be with all the costs from staff, for example. So people were saying it's too brave, it's too challenging. But I think on the surface, like you said, people would think this product is just getting on like under the radar. A lot of people are trying to add this into the portfolio. But to be honest with you, there are also a lot of challenges throughout this journey, especially we started from scratch. We have very stringent, strict type of investment rules for the investors in this region. Like you have this AUM for the company that you need to meet, a minimum of 3 years track record, that kind of limitations, and also the holding limit on your product. So it takes a lot of time and work to really overcome all these challenges, I would say.
Talking about challenges, what do you think has been the greatest challenge?
The greatest challenge, I think, for the company that I'm running with the partners right now.
Or from the personal level, whatever you prefer.
I think would be the switch out from banking to the asset management side. It would be one of the challenges. I would say, I can't say I don't have any challenges in my life, but I can't think of something very serious that, really changed my whole life in terms of like on the career side. But I think the struggle is when we were younger, I think we focused more on like the compensation that we'd be making, being at the front office, having a lot of people to take care of you. If you start with a smaller platform starting from scratch, you pretty much have to do everything on your own. I even went to fax something or mail a letter myself and do the photocopying. Like those are things that we were quite spoiled as, working in a trading floor before. And I think this is the challenge that I mentally face. Like you have to reevaluate if you are doing the right thing, if this is the right path, that type of struggle. I think it would be one of the challenges that I had.
It's quite funny. So I work for a hedge fund in kind of like my day job, and the guys, there were 3 of them that were in New Zealand. And if you look back on their kind of profiles, they were one person was kind of head of ops, head of compliance, head of investor relations, and they all had about 5 or 6 titles. And I think like when you're a really small company, you just have to wear lots of different hats, right?
Exactly.
That's the game. But I think it makes you appreciate it a little bit more now. And I think now we look back and I speak to, my boss and he used to be head of compliance, and like compliance is like one of the things that he doesn't really enjoy very much now. And it kind of makes us laugh that he was the go-to guy that investors used to talk to.
Yes, I share that feeling. I think I've never imagined myself being like so knowledgeable on the operation side. Why is there a settlement failure? How do you solve it? And on the compliance, I can read term sheets right now, at least the basic knowledge. So like you said, it's a learning curve, but I think I enjoy the journey as well.
For sure. Outside of ETFs, obviously, you're a big participant in Asia and stuff. Are there any like interesting trends or themes that you see that like people maybe wouldn't be aware of or be surprised by?
I think we all try to be very creative here in terms of like finding something innovative. But I can tell you, since we have announced about the green economy or carbon neutralization type of mandate, a lot of people are like going into this ESG field, especially on the reducing carbon footprint type of trends. But personally, I think even the basic offerings for products right now for the region, for ETF, for example, we are still short of a lot of different asset classes. So I can't say it's like something that people didn't notice, but maybe they don't think it's worth the time to test and trial and see if it works. For example, we launched the US dollar hedge ETF. In the past, people would think it's not very reasonable because of the Hong Kong dollar is pegged to it, but then they neglected that the underlyings are not. So I think these are some trends that we're starting to see the first product. I know it's not the new stuff for the US or maybe Europe market, but for us, it's quite the new thing right now. And beyond ETFs, I think we try to look at some other like private equity type of investments before as well. I think that was why you have seen from my profile, I also joined the Milken Circle. I think that was very helpful for me to meet more people beyond just the asset management field. You can tell like the people from finance are coming from a lot of different backgrounds. And I think with that type of networking opportunities, I actually get to meet more people beyond my day job, which I actually enjoy very much as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's also been kind of like one of the quite exciting things about doing, obviously, the MacroMentors part from Armin and I's thing. We are getting to meet people from kind of all over the world. And I think when you're quite young and you start in finance, you don't actually know that 99% of these jobs exist. You suddenly speak to someone who does something really niche and you're like, I had no idea that it means, hopefully one of the kind of hopes we have of kind of the podcast and sharing some of these people is to give people some belief that these jobs actually do exist and they need to understand that there is kind of a way to get into them. I think we've kind of, especially in Europe, I can't say so much for Asia, but there's like a very kind of, it seems like it's a very step process now, right? It's like you go in this grad scheme of this thing and, that can't work for everyone. And people have to believe that there are other jobs out there and there are jobs that have, things that they never even would have thought of, which they may actually like quite enjoy from the start. And I've seen it consistently, people doing things that I've just never even heard of.
Likewise, I have browsed through all the profiles of the speakers on your platform as well, and I was quite pleasantly surprised by how wide these people are coming from different backgrounds. I think, like you said, one of the mistakes I would say I had made before is that I made assumptions. Like I thought someone from corporate finance would be doing such and such, but when I try to speak to them more, the technicality or some of the knowledges that they have within this region, specifically, for example, for their own market, is something that you would not learn from books or just by assuming or reading from research. You will have to speak to these people in person. So I think this is very interesting for me.
Yeah, I think there's like I don't know if cultural norms is the right way to say it. So there's also like you got the cultural norm that maybe exists in the country, but there's also almost like I find even in the trading side, there's like cultural norms that exist within little markets. Like you do this within this market, you do that. And there's just no book that you can read that tells you that.
Exactly. I had this feeling very strongly when we were doing the factor research for the onshore China market. Like you said, some of the behaviors when you see the trading pattern from the US, for example, is something contrary and totally opposite in local market, and you don't understand why is that existing, and it takes a long time to find out. But I can share that maybe in another time. It's a very long research. Yeah.
Sure.
I can't remember if it's Shanghai copper, but one of those markets has still got a smoking break in it. And it's like, there's like activity and then there's this like 15-minute gap. And like, if you wouldn't know, like you have to really zoom in on the chart to see it, or you'd be looking at like the tick data and you're like, why does everyone stop trading? And there's literally a break for everyone to go to like a cigarette in the middle of the afternoon, and then everyone comes back and trades. And like, if you were just sitting on the other side of the planet researching copper, that just would not make any sense to you, right? Like, you would think that that's absolutely like bizarre. And I've always found things like that quite interesting, that you see them kind of like crop up. And I think I think it's almost quite nice to see. I think like sometimes we exist in this kind of world where people are getting rid of all these like little cultural quirks. And I think sometimes they're actually quite fun and exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you see, like, switching topics slightly, how do you see Hong Kong right now, like, develop a little bit as a kind of career or finance hub, compared to, obviously there are a lot of other hubs, or a lot of people that like recently, at least from my knowledge, moved to, for example, Singapore. How do you see this evolving? Let's say I'm a young graduate. Where should I go? Is Hong Kong still as attractive as it was, used to be? Or is there one, and where's the opportunity maybe for me in Hong Kong in particular? Because obviously, as we just talked, there's a large variety of things I can engage myself in finance.
Sure. I think you might think I'm biased, but I can tell you that from a very objective perspective, because this is a topic that we always discuss about, I think it's a very good question. A lot of my friends also moved to Singapore because they have family, they have kids. I would agree that maybe during this time, like we said, the COVID constraints or the regulations here is a lot more tight compared to the rest of the region. That's why a lot of people were choosing to either move to somewhere else, like Singapore, like you said, especially those who came from mainland to Hong Kong, because they have seen what happened in the mainland, and they thought that they would like something more different. They would prefer to go elsewhere to try the lifestyle as well. And a lot of the expats also went back home because they can work from home during this time. But I think it depends on what you want in your, not only career, but as a lifestyle. Because Hong Kong, I think you have both been here before, you know how we live our life here. Or if you have even lived here, you know the tax rate here is very low. Even the cap here we're talking about 17%. It's very attractive if you are just starting your career, especially in finance. I can tell you the packages that we pay here is very competitive, because I've seen CVs coming from everywhere in the world, even from Europe or from Canada, US. I can see that the total comp after tax, Hong Kong is a lot higher from that perspective. So, and if you live here, of course, the housing is very expensive. But if you have plans to invest in a small flats, we don't have the capital gain tax. I mean, this kind of like, the rules and the taxes treatments here are quite beneficial to younger professionals who want to build a family eventually, and then want to have more savings. And also, I think I cannot say for COVID we are very vibrant here, or a lot of happenings would be here. But I think in the past we have seen we are one of the international finance center. I don't think this will go away even with the COVID zero strategy that we got this order from mainland. I think eventually we will still be a very important hub for mainland China to experiment a lot of their projects and to connect them with the international world. So a lot of the policies, even for like the July 1st, Hong Kong 25th return ceremony, you see the president would come from China to celebrate with us. I think from some of these gestures, you can tell that they are still quite keen to develop this city. But because of some of the constraints that we see right now from the pandemic, it has to be slowed down. So I'm not trying to be the cheerleader or ambassador, but personally, I will be staying here as well while I try to build my career or save more for the retirements in the future. So it depends on your perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's always a special whisper that Hong Kong has full of energy and full of opportunity. Like even compared to Singapore, Hong Kong is always the place where the energy, the level of energy on the streets, I mean, always kind of whispers, opportunity. We are moving forward. We are at the frontier. And there might be new opportunities, like with the Bay Area kind of close. And, I've been to Shenzhen a couple of times, and I'm kind of like always also like fascinated by it, how fast it is moving. Like, and they're doing software, hardware, all of it, combining it now. Fintech, I think, seems to be another thing that's coming. Okay, great.
A question for you. So we tend to find that especially kind of like, I guess in London, we probably get a little bit more of like an American centric view, I guess, sometimes on Asia. And I think like in recent years, that's probably been a little bit more skeptical because there's some kind of, let's say, conflicts between like the American kind of, between like, let's say, America and China predominantly. If there was like one perception that you think people have in the West, which is completely wrong, actually on the ground, is there anything that sort of like points out to you that you think that if someone from the West came who'd never experienced it or wouldn't understand it, they would be quite surprised by?
Okay, I'll have to make sure I don't cross the line, but I don't want to be very political or trying to sound more on that end. But I think when I speak to a lot of the clients or partners outside of Asia, they always worry about how free we are or if we still have any degree of freedom. Like they will ask me if I'm being monitored on my WhatsApp when I talk to my friends, that type of misperception. I think it is true that they were trying to implement a lot of laws like the national security law or do a lot of things that the schedule or the timeline is very tight or very fast happening. So a lot of people would not have enough time to accept it. But honestly speaking, I think this is something that we're seeing everywhere in the world. Like even when I study in Canada, we also have the national security law. We also have to stand up to sing for the national anthem in the morning. It's not something that only happens in China. So I think this is some of the misperception that maybe some friends, by just reading from what the media presented on the situation that we are facing in Hong Kong, I can say, because I live here, it's not that bad. We are still living our life as usual, as long as you are not crossing the line or doing something. But I think for us, it's not easy for us to do something crossing that line for us living in this city. So I think this is one of the misperception. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always an interesting one because I think like as kind of news has become especially a lot more kind of clickbait and attention kind of driven, like it's always the most horrific video or the most horrific picture or whatever that gets spread, and then people build this kind of misconception. And I think like you tend to find this kind of in everything. Obviously you have done pretty well going from sort of trading and ETFs and that. If someone asked you, you know, Laura, what would be like some good books or resources that are really worth checking out because I'm trying to learn a little bit more, or I'm just starting my career and it would be really interesting for me to know, you know, what have you used or what do you read on a daily basis that helps you kind of inform your decisions? What sort of thing do you use?
Or frameworks or advice?
Sure. To be honest with you, on a daily basis, I think the most frequent articles source that I would read would be on Bloomberg because it's like a summary of all the news globally. But I think in terms of books, I don't know if I can say the names here, but then a lot of the more senior investment professionals, like those who existed 40 years ago in Hong Kong, who came from the US and UK, they wrote very good books about the investment philosophies. So maybe I can share the name later. There are a few of them that I just recently read. I think being in the industry for some time, we have some experiences or some, I can't say learning, but yeah, you have some inspirations from your daily, maybe from trading, for example. But I think from reading these books, you can see that how people are walking the similar journey, but using different attitude or different approaches. I like reading people who write about like their professional life or even their whole life. Like the Dr. Stanley Ho, he wrote a book about himself, the Casino King from Macau. So I like reading this kind of books, nonfiction books here. Yeah.
Yeah, I think especially when you're trying to grow your own business, it's always quite interesting to see how other people grew theirs. And also to try and understand that, you know, I think you're always going to go through periods where like it's not always going right, and to understand that like actually that tends to happen for everyone, and like everyone has like some sort of like coping mechanism, or they have a way, or how did they deal with it, what was good for them, what was bad for them, you know, oh, this is how they approached it. I think it's like quite a useful kind of mantra to follow.
Yeah, and I think one good thing about Hong Kong is that it's a very small city. If you want to talk to someone or meet with someone, it's a very easy, just one call away. We can meet in Central or anywhere. So a lot of these advices that I sometimes would need for work or for even personal development, I like to talk to the people here, not only the senior people, but people from this industry or sharing similar values. I think that's very helpful as well.
Yeah. Interesting. Let's
All right.
go on. Armin, you go.
Yeah, I mean, Laura, so you're involved in mentoring, I think also at the local business school as well. Like from a mentoring perspective, before we go, what you like to, what do you like to teach on MacroMentors, obviously? What do you think is like the most important kind of trait or aspect that a mentor can provide? Or like, thinking back on your own journey, like, what would have been useful to you when you were like, 20, 25 years old and, starting your career?
Sure. That's a good question as well. I think a lot of the mentees that I worked with before, because of age or because of culture, they're quite shy and not as proactive to ask questions. I think as a mentor, it was very helpful for me to ask some questions for them to lead them to think about what they should be thinking and ask questions about. I don't know how to put it in a better way, but I think you have to be the inspirational type of role during the journey, because if you tell them everything, sometimes they will not remember or they will not appreciate as much, because usually you will learn from experiences more than from what people tell you. So I think from the previous years when I was doing the mentor program for the local universities, I think that was more helpful when I tried to reach out more and try to start with something small, like a small topic conversations, and lead them to think about something bigger for maybe the career development.
It's really about guidance, isn't it? About like broad frameworks to, to inspire people.
Yeah, I think because if we share more like on the technical side, a lot of people can learn most of the stuff from books. I think it's more like the attitude, the way to think about things that happen around them. Those kind of guidance would be a lot more helpful.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a thing of there's a big difference between someone telling you something and you getting there yourself. Like if you suddenly work out, like, someone, it's the whole, like, you can take the horse to water, but you can't make it drink kind of analogy. But like, if you tell someone to do something, it's quite different to like trying to point them in that direction and then they get there by themselves and they believe that they've made the decision for themselves. Usually I think people are a bit more effective when they do that and they probably make better decisions.
Yeah, I was thinking if I should say something very cliche, because like they always say, if you want to teach someone, you teach them how to fish instead of giving them the fish. So that's the type of like attitude.
Yeah, perfect. So obviously you are one of our mentors on MacroMentors. Would you like to offer kind of generalized mentoring, or there's any specific products that you're going to be looking to share with people?
I think for ETF, it's a very general and simple product to learn about, but how you make use of it, how do you maximize out from using a very transparent product? I think maybe I can provide some insights to that. And also the ecosystem. It's not only about having an ETF listed in the market, but the capital market functions, the relationships, how to build those. I think being an insider, I will have more to share than from what they just read from books, for example. But in terms of general mentoring, I was also thinking about this because how can I add value to someone's career planning? Like if I just give them the traditional "oh, work hard, don't give up" type of comments, they won't really appreciate it as much. But I think because I learned my lessons the hard way as well, on how to build personally, how to plan for retirement, I think it's more like your whole person, individual type of planning. I think that would be more helpful. And I didn't mention this earlier, but I think in terms of the diversity, like gender diversity, is already a very common topic nowadays. But back in the time when I started, I think I was the only female trader in my team. Oh. So there were some lessons learned as well, how to make use of disadvantage or disadvantage. People have different perspectives, but I think it was an advantage for me to make it through and to build the team together. I think that type of insight, I don't know, maybe you can give me some guidance as well, because you know what they like to hear about.
It's interesting. I do quite a lot of like these kind of calls with some of the banks, and you know, in my mind, actually, when I go on the calls, I find that more of the traders in Asia are female than probably any other geography.
Really? It's a surprise to me.
You know, if I go on a call to Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan, and you know, it's obviously everything's changed now because it's all kind of on Zoom, so you can actually kind of see what's actually happening. And it surprised me a lot because I think like there's obviously these huge projects that are happening in the West to try and like balance everything out on the gender equality. And I've always had this kind of perception that maybe in Asia it's almost because it's happened, like the industries have built a bit later, it's happened quite naturally. But maybe I'm just seeing like one very small piece of a trading floor. And that's not a fair reflection. But yeah, I've always been quite surprised. I would say it was almost like females over males for most of them that I've seen.
I think maybe you're talking to like a bulge bracket type of houses that they are more keen to diversify the gender. Like for the regional houses, because when I first joined the Asian regional asset manager, I was also having some culture shock as well about how male dominant it is, how top down it is, how hierarchical it is. And how do you play through that? Because in a trading floor, like you said, usually P&L speaks. People who is capable, who can perform, they will get the respect. But in a different culture, even you are the same person, you perform the same. It's not really the same story. So I think there were some knowledges, but maybe it's more like back like 10 years ago. If we talk about the timeline, I agree with you. Nowadays, I'm really seeing a lot more female from that perspective.
And going back to your kind of question on kind of like what to offer. So, you know, I think the bit that people find quite tricky is the kind of the journey, right? Which is like, I'm either in some kind of role that I don't really like, and I don't know how to go sideways or go to a different industry, or I think I'm interested in this thing, but I don't really, you know, like I don't have a network. I don't really understand how to start getting one. I'm a bit scared to do it. And it's having like a kind of basic framework about, right, I've got a target or I've got a problem. And I have the advice of someone who's kind of been there or done it before. And they help me put that into a framework. Okay, or like, how do I resolve a conflict at work? How do I think about getting into an industry? I'd like to try and become a manager. You know, like what are the things that my bosses need to see from me? And like, how do you create kind of a bit of a strategy for yourself going about all those different things kind of in your life? I think that's the core thing that people kind of want help with. That would be my kind of 2 pennies.
Yeah, I see. Like if you mentioned that now, I can recall some of the conversations that we had with like the trainee in the past. They always have these assumptions that being the front office, being the trader would be like the best job you should get from trading floor, but they also forget about their own strengths, like you said, where what they enjoy doing.
Right.
Some people push themselves to the cliff, like to the bottom line, that when they talk to clients, they don't enjoy it at all. They are just like doing a daily job, reading out from their notes. So the attitude is also quite important. I think, like you said, in a very fast-paced environment, people usually won't spend too much time to talk to you about yourself, like what you really wanted and what you are good at. It's all about for them to find all these themselves. And I also want to reiterate it, like you said, the network power is very important. Network is not like finding as many new friends or meeting as many people as you can in this industry, but more like people that you can, I can't say support each other on. I don't know how to put it in the right way. Let me have a think on that. But I think it's also a strategy that we should learn when we grow in this industry.
Yeah, you have to actually be quite careful, because finance has this kind of golden handcuff problem where you can sit where you're doing something you're quite frustrated doing, or it's not actually making you happy, and you are suddenly like, you know, the financial side is getting better and better and better, and actually that makes it harder and harder to go actually and do something about it. I think like,
yes,
one of the best things you can kind of be is like a little bit stoic along the way and kind of know when to pull the parachute on something that you don't kind of enjoy. It's like you have to get up every day and do something, and you need to try and enjoy it. Like I've met many people who are kind of 30 years deep into this, and they're like, I really don't enjoy it. And you have to enjoy your life. You can't just like go and do like, and the golden handcuffs become like tighter and tighter and tighter as you get older and your costs grow. And I think like
exactly
one piece of advice I tend to give people, someone I used to work with lost her job recently, and she's like she's 2 years in. And I said, the first question you need to ask yourself is, do you actually enjoy finance? Like she was like, how do I get another job? Like, where do I go? And the better question to ask yourself is like, okay, well, like now I've got this opportunity where someone's kind of almost like pulled the parachute cord for me. Do I actually enjoy finance? Or is there like certain bits of the job that I really enjoy, certain bits I don't? And I could do those certain bits in another industry and be much, much happier. And I think like having the kind of like, it's easier to say when you're a bit older, but like if you're a bit younger, I think at certain times that would have really helped me, is being able to like sit back and put it all in perspective and try and actually like make kind of educated decisions about actually like it would make sense to go and do this, or this skill that you have would be much better used or rewarded in this place.
Yeah, I think like you said, at some point we'll always be quite confused about like, what you're doing at the moment, because like for doctors or accountants, you have some transferable skills that you can like always go into other companies or other fields. But for finance, it's something very abstract and it's not that solid. And I think, like you said, I think I didn't share that earlier, but I also had this chance to kind of switch out from finance when I was switching from sell side to buy side. I thought I could try to do something else, like you said, to experiment and see if I would be happier with something else. And I tried to get into jewelry business. I was studying GIA, trying to do some designs on that. But I missed the pace and the people that I work with back in finance. Like people are very smart, very fast, very efficient. It's a circle that I like to be surrounded by. So I think, like you said, if you're still young, you have this opportunity to go and try something else and come back. It's still not too late. But I think, like you said, a lot of people won't have this courage as well, because it's like stepping out from the comfort zone.
Yeah, it can be pretty. I think for what I tend to see is that people have told themselves their whole life that they want to be something. They've studied like crazy. They finally got the job. Then they arrive and do the job, and it's not exactly what they think. It's not quite as exciting as what they thought it was going to be. I think a lot of people arrive and they think that they're going to be their boss's job on day one. And sometimes it's actually quite boring. You're just smashing around in Excel spreadsheets and getting coffees and things like that. And that kind of, I think, like pops your bubble a little bit. And a lot of people find that a really, really tough scenario, because they've gone through their whole life telling everyone like, I'm going to be a trader, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and actually getting there and it being disappointed is really, really disappointing, right? We've all been to a restaurant that we've thought like, oh, I'm really excited about going, and the food's terrible. It's just like these people are doing this with like their whole lives, right? And I think it's really, really hard for them. But yeah, hopefully we help educate a few more people to make better decisions and give them a bit of a framework to make these decisions in, let's say, a slightly more logical way.
And don't always have the fantasies. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say,
no, I would just say like it's a little bit about like reaching your own potential as well, right? Because if you don't make the decision, you never know really, if you're always playing safe, and that might mean that you never reach your potential, which usually if you reach, your potential, it makes you happy, because progress often equals happiness, at least.
Yeah.
So, okay, great. Any other kind of like source apart from MacroMentors, Laura, where people can find you or your work or anything related?
Well, we do write some researches over time, but then it's not always being published. I don't know if like the resources you mean like the social media or.
Yeah, it would just people can follow you. Maybe like newsletter or the research is interesting for sure if you publish something.
I was thinking if I should do that on LinkedIn. We usually use our company account to publish these, So it will be under our company's name. But I think maybe going forward, now I have another platform as well, because I'm on some other platforms, like I am doing some board advisory for a club called the Young Investor Society, which originated from the US. We would do some sharing with them, but it's more like a Zoom call instead of something written that you can find. So still quite limited sources right now, I would say. Maybe going forward, I can publish more and post more. Yeah.
Yeah, well, whenever you have something in mind, we can include in the show notes later as well.
Sure. That sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you for taking time out of your day to have a chat to us. I know that you've got another call coming up, so we'll let you we'll leave you alone. I want to thank you a lot, and especially from all of our kind of MacroMentors community. Thanks for sharing your story with everyone. And we look forward to having you back on in the future again, if you wouldn't mind.
That's great. Thank you for making the time as well. Thanks for having me today.
All right, awesome.
Thank you so much, Laura.
See you later.
Thank you. See you.